What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, live from an undisclosed location, somewhere in the Sacramento area at my mother's house. And today we're going to try to talk a little football because I've been on vacation and we've been up in Lake Tahoe. Came back on Saturday morning for an engagement party with our families. And as we were heading up to the party, I was watching the American Century golf tournament. And obviously NBC, by the time I came out, I put on my shoes, walked back out to the living room. And me and Maria were just kind of glued. We were late to the party. And then obviously you get to the party and all anyone wanted to talk about was Donald getting shot at, grazed. We had a lot of police officers that are dating and married to a friend. So it dominated the conversation that I just saw right before I got. It's a moment you'll never forget. I mean, that visual of him being chased off the stage with his fist up. And then today Donnie's playing golf. So, yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say. It's fucking bananas. And like I said, we're going to try to talk football today because it's what we do here. Little escape from the madness that's going to be everywhere. And I had some things. I almost recorded this on Friday because I wanted to touch on the Giants Hard Knocks, which I just find fascinating. I watched both episodes when I was up in Tahoe, and I also watched an episode of Receiver, which actually people at the party had watched it too, and that's all they wanted to talk about. I only watched the first episode. My buddy's dad was diving deep. He was fascinated by Jimmy Garoppolo getting Davante Adams killed and Davante Adams basically wanting to quit the Raiders. But I haven't watched that episode yet. I've just seen the clips on the interweb. So we'll dive into the Giants Hard Knocks. I have a bunch of takeaways from that, a couple thoughts on the receiver, and just a couple other NFL news and notes. Try to do a little podcast here. I mean, training camp. I saw the Ravens rookies reported, but most teams within the next week, their rookies will report, which you better know your shit when you show up to training camp as a rookie. First, second round guys are on scholarship, mostly third rounders too, but 4th through 7th, you'll get passed fast by the practice squad guy from last year, by an undrafted free agent. So I'm a sucker for training camp. It's the ultimate meritocracy in America for those late round picks, the guys that were on practice squads the year before, guys kind of floating around. And it's just a battle to try to get a couple roster spots. Now, most teams, I guess the good teams probably have less than 3 or 4 true open spots, but some of the bad teams have a ton. So it's going to get fun. We're going to buckle up, and obviously we're going to be talking a lot of football for the next 6 months. She's like, when do you want to get married? I'm like, well, not for a while because football season kind of takes up our weekend. So it's not going to happen until 2025. But yeah, before we dive in to football, I got to tell you about my friends. Game Time. Here's the thing. You want to go to a concert? Do you want to go to a baseball game? Do you want to go to a football game this fall? I saw someone said like 52 days or 50 days till the first football game. Could be off. But college starts a little earlier, obviously, than the NFL. And I'm not counting preseason because those games suck, even though you get very excited to watch them. And I've been to a bunch when I worked in the NFL and then when I did radio. And you're excited because football's finally here, then the game starts going. But obviously, there's nothing like regular season games, college or pro. And that's where my friends Game Time come in. Concerts. I saw Morgan Wallen just canceled. But if you want to go see his shows, I have. He's pretty good. But whoever you like, if you're a Swiftie, my friends at Game Time, go check them out. Long-time official ticketing app of this podcast. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay. Before I get critical of some stuff with the Giants, I got to say, I think this is the coolest Hard Knocks that has happened since I was like in college. And I'm almost 40 years old. I've never quite seen something this in depth is probably the wrong way to put it, but behind the curtains. One issue I've had with Hard Knocks over the last decade, which I understand, because if I was a team, I wouldn't want to show the deep conversations inside the staff meetings when you're crushing players with social media, everything goes viral. I get it. Now, I understand it's still an entertaining product for some, but I've said for a while, it's not really for me because I kind of like the nitty gritty. Like people get cut in the NFL, right? Coaches badmouth guys because they're not good enough. It's like that's part of the business, but teams have shied away from it and you don't get any of it. Now, one thing we've gotten, I would say, over the last 3 or 4 years is this incredible self-produced stuff from the teams. The Colts do a good job. The Jets did one this year. A lot of teams do it, and I'm missing teams, but draft meetings of them going to Indianapolis. And if you're a sucker for the scouting world, the draft, free agency, it's cool. The Colts have been doing a great job for a long time with this. But this Hard Knocks has given conversations from the GM and to agents of players to episode 2 was one of the best Hard Knocks episodes I've ever seen because Brian Daboll talking with the quarterbacks was incredible. It was freaking awesome. Caleb, Jaden, Drake May. I mean, all these guys are impressive. And one thing we've been talking for a while, these quarterbacks in 2024, they've been playing on these 7-on-7 leagues since they were like 10, 11, 12 years old. It was an impressive group, which we knew. I mean, 6 guys went in the top 12, but it was really, really cool. And if you're a football nerd, Dayball with these quarterbacks was kind of football porn. It was awesome. I cannot recommend it enough. If you haven't seen it, episode 2, elite. Joe Schoen, listen, seems like a really nice guy. I've said for a while, it's true in coaching, and it's definitely true in the front office. Not everyone is meant to be a number one, and to me, feels a little bit more like a number 2. Asking a lot of questions of his group, which is normal, but it kind of feels like this guy's a GM. I worked for Howie Roseman. I don't quite get those vibes from this guy. One major issue that I think he's going to have is it's not about what happened this offseason. I understand their decision to move on from Saquon Barkley because of the financial situation that Daniel Jones presents. But they fucked this up last year. That it made no sense. One thing with running backs, for a long time, I would say 6-7 years ago, when some of the Gurley, Zeke Elliott contracts were happening, they backfired. But in the last year and then this year, running backs are actually a discount. They're the one guy, I would say, on the offense who you can get at a bargain because wide receivers, we know good ones cost $25 to $35 million now. Guards are costing $18, $19 million. We know how much sweet offensive tackles cost. But wait, I can sign a running back to $11, $12, $13 million a year. I wouldn't do that with everybody, but the Christian McCaffreys, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley. John Mara said multiple times, I don't know if I'm that comfortable with losing Saquon Barkley because our offense sucks without him. And Joe Schoen's whole point is we have to figure out Daniel Jones. I was like, have to figure out? You just gave the guy $40+ million a year last offseason. You have to figure him out. Think how crazy that is. This is why we discuss these quarterback contracts ad nauseum. Because when you pay a guy, listen, I was watching the golf tournament. Trevor Lawrence is there. He's not very good at golf, but there's a lot of unknown there. And I would obviously rather have Trevor Lawrence than Daniel Jones. But when I have to give a guy $200 million guaranteed, I don't like to have a lot of questions. Listen, the Dak Prescott contract over the last 4 or 5 years, you can quibble with his performances in the playoffs, justifiably so. He has not been very good, but he has been extremely productive in the regular season. And every single year for the last 3 years, they've won 12+ games. So it's like, yeah, he's been worth it to them. Now I think they're asking themselves, do we want to double down on that with the prices that you have to pay if this guy can't win us a Super Bowl? And I've said for a while with Dak, I do think he's capable of getting hot in a playoffs and making a run. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I've seen Eli Manning do it. I've seen Joe Flacco do it. It's possible with Dak Prescott. I believe, and I think most people would agree with me, it is impossible with Daniel Jones. But because of their situation, they have to let Saquon Barkley go. Here's the problem. I think Joe Schoen is going to get fired at the end of the season if Saquon Barkley has a big year with the Eagles. And how's he not going to have a big year with the Eagles? Their offensive line is freaking awesome. And the depth on their offensive line is awesome. How is he not going to be sweet? Now, the new episode that's coming out, they showed like the preview. And even Mara said, like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with him going to the Eagles. And I think if you're Joe Schoen, listen, if Saquon had gone to some random team that's going to win 6-7 games, whatever. But he goes to your division rival for not that much money. And here's the thing with the division rival. They've been to the playoffs the last 3 years. They beat you in the playoffs 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they were in the Super Bowl. We know they're really well run. And even if they underachieve, guess what? They're going to be pretty good. Last year was a disaster for them. And the Giants would have given everything to have that season that they just had. And Howie Roseman and Sirianni fired like half the coaching staff. So I don't see letting him go and not quite understanding his market and knowing that the Eagles wanted him. That's going to hurt. And it's going to backfire hard. And if Daniel Jones coming off this ACL, and I understand like Malik Neighbors. I said it before the draft, he was the best prospect because he had the highest upside. Doesn't mean he's going to be the best player, right? Obviously, Marvin Harrison's awesome. Rome's sweet. A lot of wide receivers in this draft are probably going to turn out to be pretty good. But the one thing Joe Schoen kept saying, and I just don't understand, is he kept hammering on the offensive line. We need to get better on the offensive line. And then you take a receiver at number 6. Now, they already have a couple tackles, so could they have taken J.C. Latham? You know, could you play him at guard? I think he played guard early in his Alabama career. But here's the thing I don't understand. Like, do they know what they're doing when it comes to building a team? And that starts with Joe Schoen. Because let's use Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz as an example. All the conversation leading into the draft, which was laughable, was like, Chargers, get rid of Mike Williams, get rid of Keenan Allen. They're going to take a wide receiver at number 5. And anyone who knows football went, bullshit. Jim Harbaugh is going to take an offensive lineman. And what did he end up doing? Taking an offensive lineman. And what did he say the night of the draft? I view offensive linemen as weapons. Because you know why? When you say Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, there is a specific identity with and led by, you know, Brett Veach, Lynch, obviously Ozzie and DaCosta, and now Ortiz coming from the Ravens with Harbaugh, of their identity as a football program, as a football team. You know what you're getting. What are the Giants doing? When I worked for the Eagles, listen, I'm a West Coast guy. I had never even really been back to the Northeast. I actually don't think I ever had. The first time I was ever in Philadelphia or New York or Washington was when I got hired. And, you know, whether I scouted, you know, they were the Redskins at the time, or at MetLife against the Giants. I was an NFC West guy, you know, growing up. And the Giants, I'll never forget. At the time, my second year, they won their second Super Bowl in 2011. When you were on the sideline and that team came out, they had a clear identity. You knew exactly what Tom Coughlin and the Giants organization stood for, what they looked for in players. And I see a team right now that feels lost. And when you're lost in a division with teams that kind of know what they're doing, listen, the Cowboys, biggest brand in the league, they're the Yankees of football. You cannot diminish their identity as a football team and what they have invested in over the last decade plus. Offensive linemen. They've taken offensive linemen in the last 2 years. Now, are those guys going to be high-end players? Time will tell. I mean, this year they took a project, but I would probably bet on it. Like, I know what the Cowboys want to do. when it comes to building their team. Now, their coach sometimes says he wants to run the ball, then he passes the ball, and obviously Dak, they don't have a running back. But I don't think the Giants have any identity. And that's why Washington has been so shitty for 20 years. They've gone through coaches. They've gone through GMs. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters are going to have an identity immediately. You know why? Because Adam Peters has learned from Kyle and John, from John Elway and Bill Belichick. Like, he has specific type players that he looks for. And his draft just showed this. And when you watch Joe Schoen and they're just kind of talking, Mike Lombardi talks about this a lot, with play calling, just like throwing darts at a dartboard. I'm just calling plays. There's no rhyme or reason, right? I'm not setting any. It's some play callers. That's why most play callers aren't that good, because, and I've talked to my scouting buddies who think, and I believe this too, you're kind of instinctive doing it. You either kind of have it or you don't. That's why some offensive coordinators get their shot. You're like, this doesn't work. And some guys just, there's a feel for it. It's obviously you get better, like in anything in life, with experience, the more you do something. But when I watch the Giants, like, I'm just like, what is going on here? What are you guys doing? That's my big question mark. What the hell are you guys doing? Do you guys have any direction? And like I said, if Saquon Barkley and if feels like not strong enough, when has a really successful season, the Eagles, I think it would be pretty shocking if they're just not in the playoffs. Most people, including myself, don't think the Giants are going to be any good. I think that could end. That could end Joe Schoen. Think about, and listen, I thought John Robinson, I know he had a rough last couple of years, but I've known John back. I met him when I was at Fresno State. He did a pretty good job of building up that Titans team when Vrabel first got there. But what was his undoing? That A.J. Brown thing. It destroyed him. They traded A.J. Brown. He goes to the Eagles, and then they end up playing the Titans, right, randomly a little bit, because it just happened to be that year you were playing, that cross division in the AFC, and A.J. eviscerated them. And that was the end of his GM career with the Titans. And the problem for the Giants with Saquon, they're not only going to see him twice a year, they all play the same teams. And that division, it's a little SEC-like, right? Everyone follows those four teams really closely in all those cities. I mean, New York's a pressure cooker. They've been so shitty now for so long. I think it's going to be a major problem. Now, Brian Daboll, I thought he came off pretty well. Like, just kind of a cool football guy. And the knock on him has been, definitely last year, was like, God, this guy's got to calm down. This guy is just a loose cannon. And then you saw him, and listen, I don't know him personally. It felt like just a relaxed guy having a good time, cracking jokes. But when you saw him talk football, it's like, yeah, this is a guy that worked for Belichick and Saban. He knows his shit. But he could joke about being chubby and eating chicken wings and running the 40. Like, honestly, he kind of reminded me a little bit, just in the second episode at the Combine, of like jokes Andy Reid would make. But if this team's bad because of the team that Joe has, kind of constructed over the last couple of years, you have to wonder, like, would he get a second GM or would he get fired too? And based on the Giants' history over the last, post Coughlin, they've run through a lot of people. And if you're John Mara, Saquon Barkley, high character guy, you were in this position, and Joe's like, we tried to offer him a bunch of money last year. Well, even if you would have quote unquote overpaid a little bit, it's a running back. They don't even cost that much money. But you were so dead set on paying this quarterback that everybody and their mother knew was average, what was going to be his market, if he hit free agency. I can't imagine anyone would have given that guy, over like $40 million guaranteed. And I think this is going to be his undoing. And it was just a disastrous decision that they're paying for now. But like I said, you have to have a clear philosophical belief as an organization. I've only worked for one NFL team in the league, right? Line. Howie Roseman, because he learned from Andy Reid, always drafting offensive linemen. That was just a point of emphasis. And like I said, when I was in Philadelphia watching those Giants teams, they had good offensive lines. Eli couldn't move. Eli's as fast as me, but they were stout up front. And now they just feel lost.
Forget what the calendar says. Football season is right around the corner. And that means Best Ball Week at DraftKings isn't far behind. Here's what you need to know. DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest is their biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed prize pool with two. That's right, two millionaires being crowned for the first and second place. If you're a set it and forget it type, I know I am, then best ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger rosters, so injuries will not ruin your season. Only the draft, and that's it. You're set for the year. Some of you might have heard I won $18,000 a couple weeks ago at the U.S. Open. It's an incredible high. But $15 million in prize pool, how do you beat that? Multiple millionaires crowned with winning this. I can't even imagine the high being in the mix. And like they said, no roster management. Injuries won't impact you because you got bigger rosters. Still not convinced? Check this out. This year, DraftKings is offering everyone a draft one, get one special. Your $20 entry fee scores you a bonus ticket. Get ready for best ball week at DraftKings. Download the DraftKings app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for all customers who enter the NFL Best Ball 15 Millionaire Contest to get a bonus ticket. Only during Best Ball week, only on DraftKings.
Receiver. I watched the first episode, and one of my main takeaways was this shit ain't that complicated. It's really not. And this isn't, the 70s and the 80s football anymore, right? The game is much more wide open, and you can run over the middle Jack Tatum or Jack Lambert or Ray Lewis or Cam Chancellor can't shatter your collarbone. You still get hit hard, but the crazy hits don't happen as much. I've been probably 3 or 4 times, pre-2015, where I've seen guys get carted off the field of some of the most malicious hits you'll ever see. Just I remember Deshaun Jackson got taken out, I think, in an Atlanta Falcons game when I was with the Eagles. You thought he died. I mean, you really did. There was a game where we played the Colts, and Austin Collie, remember, he was a really good player, but he had some concussion issues. I forget who on our team hit him, but you also thought he died. Pretty sure he got carted off that game. Both those guys got carted. Like, you just don't see that as much. I mean, guys still get carted off the field, but it's usually for ACLs or an Achilles. But when it comes to hits, it doesn't happen as much. But physicality in the sport not only still matters, it's essential to being successful. You cannot be good in the NFL if you do not have physical players. Let's look at the Final Four in the NFL. And obviously, 2 of the teams were featured on the first episode. I recommend it. I thought receiver, the first episode, was just pretty cool. It's a very easy watch. Deebo Samuel, one of the most physical players I've ever seen. Flawed, not a great route runner, but because he's such an elite player with the ball in his hands, and he can basically play this hybrid running back position, you just get the ball to him, screens, pitches, put him at running back, and he makes shit happen, breaks tackles, runs guys over. George Kittle, who is probably, maybe at this point he's a little older, but he hangs his hat on physicality. There were so many clips of him running guys over in the run game. And George said it like, listen, do I love to get 8 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns? Of course. But if I have 1 catch for 1 yard and we run the ball down their throat and win by 20 points, sign me up for that every day. And then you watch Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I think was a 4th-round pick. Why do guys that aren't, think about the list of players in this in receiver. George Kittle, 5th-round pick. Deebo Samuel, 2nd-round pick. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th-round pick. Davante Adams, 2nd-round pick. While Justin Jefferson was a 1st-round pick, think how many receivers were taken over. And Justin's, your prototypical elite outside wide receiver. But those other guys, Amon-Ra, the reason he ran a 4.6, but you watch him play, like, who cares? Like, his ability to get open, his toughness. You watch the background on his family. Maybe I knew this, but it definitely, like, when you're watching it, his father talked about him being in the NFL at 8 years old. He was a former Mr. Olympia, the thing that Arnold Schwarzenegger used to win all the time. And he's a serious cat. And like I said, physicality and seriousness. The best players in the NFL are so serious about their craft. Obviously, they have fun. I'm watching the celeb tournament, and Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce. That tournament is made for those 2 guys. Shotgunning beers, getting wasted, high-fiving dudes. But when it comes to football, I've said this story before, but before he was dating Taylor Swift, I ran into Travis at the golf course. And I just kind of introduced myself. I didn't want to I wasn't even trying to fanboy. I just, hey, man, I used to work for Andy Reid. And we started BSing a little bit. And he's like, yeah, OTA start in a couple weeks. This was 2 years ago. He's like, I can't wait to get back. I can't wait to get on the practice field. I can't wait to just kind of lock back in for the offseason. And the seriousness it takes. I haven't seen the Davante episode yet. And listen, I don't I understand Davante wanting to be on the Raiders. It's his I think his grandma or grandpa, it was hard for them. They could never travel to Green Bay. It's much closer to where he grew up in Northern California. He grew up a Raiders fan. I get it. Like at one point in time when Daniel Jeremiah went to the NFL Network, I begged to come back west. And obviously I haven't left since. Man, I don't plan on it. But I understand being home. But when you're a professional athlete, where you play kind of matters. And you were with Green Bay, and I get they lowballed him. And even if he wanted to leave. But when you demand a trade to the Raiders, and then they suck for a couple years, and your quarterback play is awful, like, I don't know what to tell you. What'd you expect? Kenny Stabler ain't walking through that door. Rich Gannon's like 55 years old. Hell, he might even be older because he was older when he won the MVP with Gruden in like 2000 or 2001. Maybe it was 2002. But here's what I know about Davante. That dude takes shit very, very seriously. I'm close buddies with his personal coach, Keith Williams, who's now the wide receiver coach for the Saints. He was our wide receiver coach at Fresno State, and they trained for years in the offseason. Like, these guys don't mess around when it comes to working on their craft. And all these guys, George wasn't that productive in college. Davante, smaller school, ran slow. I remember stories when I left the Eagles. Chip Kelly and his staff thought the guy was a slug, thought he sucked. Pretty good evaluation there, boys. And the knock on Deebo, he was an excellent player in the SEC, but he had a lot of injury issues. But Kyle and those guys, because they sucked at the time, coached the Senior Bowl and were around him. And like, God, I think we can use this guy. And when you see the shiny toys, like Andy drafts Xavier Worthy, he kind of knows how to use those guys. And this is my thing with Malik Neighbors, elite talent. Like I'd want him on my team. But you look at the Giants, you're like, look, you got a quarterback who's a dink and dunk guy who's just not even that good. Like, it's kind of going to waste there. Ain't really going to work. When you drafted Odell Beckham early on, why did it kind of work? Well, what did Eli do pretty well? Threw a good deep ball, had a big arm, like could push the field, could get him the rock way down, on go routes, on posts. Like they really threatened the deep part of the field. That ain't them. And guys that go over the middle and you get the ball to and can break tackles are very valuable. I don't care if you got Patrick Mahomes or you got Brock Purdy or you got Daniel Jones, because it's why running backs, like, let's face it, they're kind of valuable. Why? Very easy to get them the football. Now, value in terms of money and the cap, obviously we can discuss that all day long. But if I got Kamara, if I got Saquon Barkley, if I got Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb before he got hurt, like, it's not that difficult, even in the passing game, to make sure the ball's in his hands. And Deebo Samuel, most of his catches around the line of scrimmage. Amon-Ra St. Brown works the middle of the field at an elite level. George Kittle, like, pretty big target within 10 yards of the field. Now, he's fast. He can stretch the field. And once the ball's in their hand, like, most guys are not Cam Chancellor in the NFL anymore. And they have to, like, they can't leave their feet to tackle you anymore. And these guys break tackles. And I like tough guys on my team. Always have. I don't think that's a novel concept. And some people, every time a new coach or a new GM gets a job, we want tough, physical guys. And then I watch this, like, I know exactly what a Dan Campbell player looks like. I know exactly what a Kyle Shanahan player looks like. And guess what? Those are the winning players. It really are. I was thinking about this because last week, if you haven't checked it out, we did on the podcast. The Mike Commodore interview was fantastic. It was only on the podcast because our video kind of got messed up, and Bobby Bones. But I on Friday, I just did a little off-season top 10 coaches that, for me, not named Andy Reid. And I had Dan Campbell on there. And I was thinking about this over the last couple days in Tahoe, swimming around, having some beers. He went to the Lions and didn't just win, like, has turned them into a team that you would have to be on drugs not to pick them to make the playoffs this year. Their team is deep, high-end players everywhere. If you get hired at Ohio State, if you get hired at Oklahoma, if you get hired at LSU and you don't win, you just suck. But it's why I'm pretty high on Lane Kiffin right now. Ole Miss has never had back-to-back double-digit win seasons, and he just did it. And most people are going to pick them to make the playoffs this year. You don't do that at Ole Miss. That's not what they do. And the NFL is a little different because of the way the draft works. Every team has money. Every team has the same resources. But for whatever reason, certain teams suck way more than others. And if Dan Quinn and Adam Peters go to Washington and win, like that's more impressive than winning at the Eagles or the Cowboys. I'm not talking the Super Bowl. I'm just talking about consistently winning every single year, being in the playoff hunt. And you do that by drafting and picking the right players. Because when you get the right guys, tough guys, physical guys, guys that love football, one of my big pet peeves around draft time, is when the media freaks out when these stories of like the GM asked them, do you have we don't want balance. We want you to be all in on football. Well, no shit. I'm paying you 10, 20, $30 million a year. You ever done a job for that much money? I haven't. But if someone paid me $25 million a year to do a job, I would probably expect them to think, I'm going to spend 99% of my effort thinking about this. I'm not saying you just avoid your family, have no other life, but like it takes a little more effort. Money kind of factors in. If you work a 9 to 5 and make $50,000 a year and check in, check out, like, yeah, my expectations are a little different for you. So the expectations during the draft, like these guys that are football junkies, it usually works. Most of the best players, I mean, think about the best players the last like 20 years. Seems like football is pretty important, right? Quarterback or non-quarterback. Think about some of the best non-quarterbacks over the last 20 years. Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, just go around at different positions. Like, yeah, they're kind of all in on the sport. It kind of means everything to them. And when I watch George Kittle or I watch Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I know football on their pie chart of life means a lot. And that's important. And that just stands out watching the show. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown catches 202 balls from the jugs machine every single day after practice. Every single day. It's incredible. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I look forward to watching more episodes, and Peyton Manning and his crew. It is powerful, and obviously the media has dramatically changed, and that's why a lot of media members are very angry because they're just being pushed into irrelevancy, and a lot of these former players have gotten involved. It's the pushback on McAfee. It's like it's just jealousy. He's printing money. He gets all the big guests that they would never get, and Peyton Manning does the same. It's different because he's not like hosting a radio show or a YouTube show, but his access because of that he's Peyton Manning, being able to get that quarterback last year, being able to get the receivers is just cool. And it's not like, listen, they're not going to give you some crazy players talking shit. But Davante did a little bit, but it's very entertaining, and I enjoyed it. Okay, NFL news. Couple of little things. I do think Rodgers messes with people a little bit. And I've always thought if I was a super famous player as I got older, I would do the same. I would just say things to create just mystery is probably the wrong word, but just fuck with people. And he mentioned at the Tahoe tournament that he looks forward to playing with Davante Adams again. And a lot of people are like, what does that mean? Will the Jets trade for him? I think he just said that knowing what that word means, and he's screwing with people. I do not believe Davante Adams is going to be on the Jets. Now, I wouldn't bet my life savings on it, but I truly believe at this point, Rodgers is just going to screw with people. And I kind of find it entertaining just because when he does that, the avalanche of people trying to guess what he means, what's going on, what would the trade package be? Would they trade a couple ones? I haven't even looked at the financial ability. Do they even have any room to do that? And trust me, I don't think Mark Davis would trade him. Like, not happening unless Davante Adams demanded a trade from the Raiders, which their quarterback situation would never be out of the realm of possibility. But that seems like like it's not going to happen. One thing that's about the NFL that I think is way different than the other sports is it's obviously the in terms of American team sports is there are so many characters. Like all this is reality TV. That's what sports is. It's reality television entertainment. Their game is our entertainment. But the characters in the game are the reality TV stars, right? And that's what players are. And in basketball, for example, their players are really famous, but the assistant coaches in the NBA are pretty irrelevant to the casual fan, unless it's a former head coach, right? But just a random guy, unless you're like a nut for the team, you're not really going to know the guys. Yet in football, their characters, they have so many different angles of their characters. Obviously, the players on the field, the quarterbacks, the star defensive players, the wide receivers are big stars. Head coaches, I would say, are equally as big. I mean, the top 10 coaches in the NFL, if you just start rattling off their names, are pretty famous, right? Starting with Big Red in Kansas City, to the Harbaugh brothers, to McVay and Kyle, what LaFleur is doing. You know, Belichick and Pete Carroll are not coaching, but I mean, these guys are every bit as famous as the players, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe some would disagree, but I don't think it gets much more famous like Bill Belichick. But it's always been that way. Bill Parcells, you know, back to John Madden and Tom Landry. But assistant coaches, meaning the coordinators, are pretty big deals too. And when I was a kid, there were a couple coordinators that clearly stood above the rest. And Monte Kiffin was one of those guys. And he passed away over the weekend in Mississippi around his lane and the family. But he felt like I don't know, one of the biggest assistant coaches in my lifetime. Tampa 2, just the defense that every coach tried to. I mean, think how many people not only copied that and used that, how many coaches from his staff went on to get jobs, from Herm Edwards to Mike Tomlin. I'm sure I'm leaving guys out. I think Raheem Morris was there as well in the early mid 2000s, but he was a central figure on for about a 5-6 year stretch, easily one of the best defenses of my life. And he was just an elite coach. And it just felt like, and maybe I'm wrong, he was one of those guys that was just cool with being a coordinator. And whoever got the job wanted to keep him. And then obviously in his latter years, as Lane became a head coach, he went on to work for him, and that's cool. I mean, I can't even imagine being a football guy and having a football son who's also a football guy in the coaching profession and getting to work with each other. It's just something that, you know, has to be pretty special. And the time with Lane was a little up and down. I mean, obviously at USC didn't go that well, but just a legendary football figure. He really is. And he's one of those guys that I don't know if there's a guy in this generation, maybe Fangio, but Fangio hasn't won a Super Bowl. And I don't know if he's known. I mean, he has a specific defense he runs, but Dick LeBeau, I would say Monte Kiffin and Dick LeBeau, when I was growing up and coming into my own as a young football guy, were just, two stalwarts of the profession and two guys that were really, really famous. And part of it is they were probably the two best coordinators on two of the best teams, with just sweet players. And when you played them, they were going to rock your world. I mean, rock your world. That Tampa defense, I remember being like in high school watching them and being like, how do you even gain like 10 yards on these guys? I mean, if they had any sort of offense, who knows? Maybe they win like 2 or 3 Super Bowls. I mean, they were incredible. Some of those games, I think there was an NFC Championship game where they played the Eagles with Jim Johnson, who was also a really famous defensive coordinator, also RIP. He died a long time ago, though. And the physicality in those games was a little different than today's day and age. And just, I mean, the rules were different. And it was a war zone with football pads and a helmet. The other news I saw today is Jacoby Jones, who was just an excellent return man, just a playmaker, passed away, I think, at 40 years old. I haven't seen why, but that's just terrible news. It really is. So we're losing some football guys here, which just sucks. So rest in peace to Jacoby Jones.